It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, we are back with your Real Estate Breakfast Property Podcast and the Australian housing market, streaming right now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio. From Darwin to Perth, plus all of those wonderful regional areas that you are either living in right now or thinking about moving to. We are into March. It is a Monday, the 2nd of March. Here's a little bit of news that you might have seen over the last few days. The developer proposing a 91-storey Trump Tower on the Gold Coast was previously linked to a company collapse that left $28 million owed to creditors. Ouch. Yes, a liquidator's report into the 2010 failure found unsecured debts to lenders and the tax office and suppliers with limited recoveries made. Now, the director was reportedly uncontactable during the process and failed to provide key financial documents. And now we've got this new $1.5 billion Surfers Paradise proposal that has drawn attention given that history. Now, a question for you on a Monday is, would you buy into the Trump brand and pay a premium for doing so? Or is that like buying a liability that might come back and bite you? To buy or not to buy into the Trump 91-storey tower on the Gold Coast? You can have your say, let us know. You can leave a voice message or you can email us as always, myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, especially on that subject if you are on the Gold Coast. Now let's go to Perth right now, where we are joined by REWA Deputy President Robert Mandanici, and he's also from Paddington Realty in East Perth. And good morning to you, Robert. Welcome on this Monday morning to the Real Estate Breakfast as we circle back for your thoughts on the Gold Coast. Would you like to invest in the Trump 91-storey tower there?
I'll be very frank, the Gold Coast isn't for me, but I think you've always just got to be very careful when you're buying anything off the plan. And, I think buyers really have to do their due diligence. You've always got to be cautious when you're buying into, premium brands and premium names. Just scratch the surface and look at what are you really buying.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested just to see how the uptake is on this. That report that I just mentioned came out of the ABC, so they're raising the alarm bells, and we'll wait and see. But I'm sure that plenty of people have got some comments to make when it comes to Trump. Now, Perth sales activity, that has lifted strongly of late, up 17.1% to 884 transactions. House sales have led the charge, rising 25.6%, while unit sales increased modestly and land sales softened. The good news there is, I guess, for people selling, it is up.
Yeah, look, I think it's no surprise when we're coming off all-time listing lows. In fact, I think about 3-4 weeks ago, I think we almost hit, what seemed to be the absolute bottom in recent times for listing numbers. I think that's, this is just that flow-on effect for available stock on market. I think it's positive. It shows that there are some vendors out there who have been sitting on the fence about getting their properties to market. Finally doing so can only be a good thing for an extremely constrained supply market in Perth.
And tell us a little about Byford, because that recorded the most transactions and prices ranged from just over $500,000 in Medina to just over $2.5 million in Alfred Cove.
Yeah, well, look, I might just start with the last one first there, Alfred Cove, a much older established suburb, not surprising to see that touching those highs, a really beautiful part of Perth and as I said, a much older part of Perth. But look, Byford probably comes as no surprise now. It is a lot further out of the city, but is now very well connected with the Byford railway line. So the extension of the railway line is now complete, the electrification to Byford, a brand new station and really real easy connectivity all the way through those southern and southeastern suburbs straight to the city and to the CBD. So buyers would be looking at Byford. Byford provides first home buyers with a really good opportunity to enter the market, as well as established buyers looking for those larger lifestyle properties.
And there'll also, of course, be those investors that are following the infrastructure with the rail that you're talking about, saying, yeah, okay, the rental market is what it is. Let's offer some relief in that regard, and they're buying in. And we'll talk about the rental situation in just a moment. But first, let's move on to listings and supply. Total listings edged, this is recently 2.6% higher to just over 2,700 properties. That is driven by increases in houses, units and vacant land. Stock levels are now 16.2% above 4 weeks ago, yet does remain 45% lower than a year ago. So there's some information in all of that for you to no doubt comment on.
Yeah, look, it's very interesting to see even what a small amount of additional supply will do to the Perth market. And obviously that small bounce in listing, additional listings has had that flow on effect to the available stock that's available for sale. I think it's a pleasant change from a few weeks ago, but yes, nowhere near a year ago. We'd love to see more stock on the market. Obviously that's good for our members, but even better for the general public, whereby they've got some better choice, better available listings, a better selection of suburbs to choose from.
And you wanted to make comment about the changing the capital gains discount or threshold and what effect that is likely to have on the Perth property market.
Yeah, and I think just harking back to that earlier comment around, any small changes that you make, and I think you've just got to be very careful where changes are made, and would sort of caution governments of all persuasions to be very, very cautious when it comes to tinkering with taxation settings, and just to understand that, in a sense, it's not a discount per se, and that those perhaps benefiting from capital gains or even negative gearing, ultimately are those providing supply into the market and providing that much needed rental supply, if anything.
Yeah, and I guess if you look at the second half of that, stamp duty reforms, that is always a political football that gets thrown around. Of course, the election, surprise, surprise, is being talked about again.
Yeah, look, nobody likes paying tax. I mean, that's a reality, but, we've got to be circumspect about it and realise that taxes fund services. That's not what this is about, of course. It's really about just ensuring that we've got a much fairer system going forward. I think anything that our state government can do to ease that taxation burden on people buying homes, I think anything that they can do, the better. And in particular, even if they can look at downsizer provisions, or potentially those taxes can be perhaps moderated over a number of years, as opposed to one very large financial hit up front to the homeowner.
We are talking to Robert there in Perth. When we come back, as mentioned, we're going to have a look at the rental market. How is that affecting you in 2026? We'll talk about that after this.
Every morning from 6 a.m, we bring you the latest real estate news with diverse perspectives from leading industry experts. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week.
And a very good morning to you, Marta. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast.
Good morning, Craig. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, so 4 years in, but you haven't sort of just gone in as a salesperson working for a company. You decided to, launch your own real estate company.
Yeah, so I was with one company on the peninsula for 6 months and then moved to the agent's agency within another business. For a couple of years, we decided to come back to Q East and where we grew up and Darwin. And I thought, why not launch my own business? I want to do it my way.
Yeah, no, all credit to you. And the negativities, they are out there. In fact, they're in plain sight to see what some of the industry is doing. Social media is really bad for that because you can get sucked into the rabbit warren of people seem to be doing far better than me. And it's a huge distraction. And it can also sort of play tricks with, I guess, your mind when it comes to being successful within the industry.
Absolutely right, Craig. You've got to stay focused and believe in what you're doing. You really shouldn't have a plan B. If you are committing to real estate, you've got to be all in.
And I should say that Andy Warhol, he said all those years ago, everybody in the future is going to have their 15 minutes of fame. Problem is, these days, everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame every day. It's on a loop.
It is the way we live in a very fast-paced world. People have a short attention span. People are very quick to be not so nice to people and hide behind the computer. But again, I think you've just got to truly believe in what you're doing, be true to yourself.
So you were telling me that you were a flight attendant and operating for Emirates. So tell us a little bit about living in Dubai.
Back in 2002, the minimum age to join Emirates was 22. I applied within a month, moved to Dubai. My father lives in Poland and actually had his own real estate business, so he's quite chuffed that I've finally taken the same path. I was there for only 2 years, around 23 years ago, to work amongst all these different cultures, incredible people that I lived with, worked with, all different nationalities from all walks of life. And that really is what set the path for me in terms of knowing that I love to work with people. You've got to be patient if you're stuck in a can with hundreds of people at all sorts of hours.
Stay ahead of the competition with the latest news, insights and data analysis on the Property Podcast that keeps you informed.
It is a Real Estate Monday. We're checking in on Perth in WA this morning, and a report that was released late last week by the Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre that is warning that WA's projected population of 4 million by 2043 is at risk if critical housing shortages are not addressed. So probably as far as the numbers are concerned, that is going to be a bit of a struggle to get there. Now, let's talk about the rental market. Perth's still remaining very much constrained in the rentals with just over 1,900 properties available, broadly unchanged week on week. Listings are down compared to both 4 weeks ago and a year ago. Leasing activity has slowed as well. What is that all telling you, Robert, where you are there in Perth about the rental market? It seems to be always a talking point. Whenever I am talking to somebody commentating on the Perth property market, it comes up.
Yeah, look, and, the rental market has been a challenge in Western Australia since, let's use 2020 as the yardstick, a significant reduction in rentals in the market in total. Our members continue to report very, very low listing stock for available rental properties.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Good on you, Robert. Thanks so much for joining us on this Monday morning. Enjoy your week ahead there in Perth and talk again soon.
Thank you very much.
From first-time home buyers to seasoned investors to breaking property news, discover the stories behind the real estate.
Behaviour, Margaret, seems to be shifting here because PropTrack tells us around 24% of listings are now transacting prior to auctions as vendors accept strong early offers.
I've never in all of my life in property seen a market fueled so strongly and for such a sustained period of time and over most markets in the country all at the same time. It's well past time that we started to see a moderation to the market.
Of course, the higher income buyers, they're now accessing low deposit schemes, which is fueling it.
Absolutely, and this was always going to be the problem. The government has interfered to the point where they have an almost unmoderated scheme to help people get into the market, and it's the very people who don't really need that help who are accessing it now, and the people who do need the help are now being priced out of the market.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.